What happens when a neighbor crosses the line hurting someone you love and they don't even know who they're up against? Imagine this. Your disabled daughter is shoved by a woman called Weird, and her arm is broken in the process. The attacker, completely unaware of the consequences, thinks she can walk away without a care. But what she doesn't know is that you're not just another parent standing by helplessly. You're an ex-military officer trained to handle high-stress situations, trained to protect those you love at all costs. In that moment, the gloves come off. What started as a petty dispute turns into a fight for justice, because this is no longer about an injury. It's personal. It's about showing Karen that there are real consequences for her actions, that you won't stand by and let her hurt your child without facing the full weight of her recklessness. What do you do when someone who thinks they have power over others challenges you in the worst way possible? You fight back, and you make sure they never forget the lesson. Karen had always believed that she was entitled to control everything around her. As the president of the Homeowners Association, HOA, she wielded power over the residents in ways that were often petty and manipulative, but she never seemed to care about the consequences. For Karen, her word was law. No matter the situation, she believed that she was always right and everyone else should conform to her expectations. It didn't matter whether her views were based on real concerns or simple prejudice. She expected people to follow her lead, and anyone who challenged that was quickly labeled as a problem. When it came to my daughter Emma, Karen's views became even more dangerous. Emma was born with a physical disability, and while she was mobile and capable of doing many things independently, she faced challenges every day that others didn't understand. I'd always been extremely protective of her. Emma wasn't just my child. She was my world, my everything. Her well-being and safety were the top priorities in my life, and I'd done everything I could to make sure she had a safe environment in which she could thrive. But Karen, in her usual fashion, didn't seem to care about Emma's needs. To her, Emma wasn't normal, and because of that, she treated her differently. Emma's disability was something Karen couldn't understand or accept. To her, my daughter was weird, awkward, and an inconvenience. She didn't see a young girl who needed the ramp to navigate her school with independence. She didn't see a child who had a right to feel safe and comfortable in her community. No, Karen only saw an opportunity to criticize, to impose her opinions on others and force everyone around her to fit into her narrow view of what was acceptable. The problem started innocently enough when Karen began to complain about the ramp that led up to the entrance of my daughter's school. The ramp had been a vital part of Emma's daily routine. For as long as I could remember, a necessity for her to move about independently without needing assistance. Karen, however, decided that the ramp wasn't up to her standards. "It's an eyesore," she'd said, making it clear that she thought the ramp needed to be replaced with something more fitting for the school. Of course, she didn't consult me, Emma's family, or the school board. She didn't care about the functionality of the ramp, its purpose, or the students who relied on it. She simply felt that it didn't meet her arbitrary standards and, therefore, it needed to be destroyed. Her attitude toward my daughter wasn't new. Over time, I had seen her treat other people in the neighborhood with the same disregard. She was quick to criticize, quick to make others feel small, and always quick to assert her so-called superiority. But this time, her interference wasn't just annoying, it was dangerous. This wasn't about her opinion on landscaping or the aesthetics of someone's garden. This was about something deeply personal. This was about my daughter's ability to live her life with independence, and Karen was threatening that independence without any regard for the consequences. Knew the HOA had been a tool of power for Karen. She had a history of pushing her agenda and flexing her control over the neighborhood. But the way she approached this situation with Emma was something I couldn't just ignore. I tried to stay calm, to reason with Karen. I explained the importance of the ramp, how essential it was for my daughter to feel like she belonged at the school just like every other child. But Karen didn't listen. She wasn't interested in understanding the situation. She wasn't concerned with Emma's safety or well-being. She had already made up her mind. She would get her way, no matter the cost. When I received the call from the school that day, my heart sank. "There's been an incident," the principal said, his voice panicked. "Emma's hurt. It's bad. It's Karen. She did something." The words barely registered in my mind. My daughter, the one person I'd fought so hard to protect, was hurt. And the person responsible? The same person who had treated her as less than human, the same person who had no respect for her needs or her dignity. Karen. I rushed to the school, my mind spinning. When I arrived, the sight before me was worse than I could have imagined. Emma was lying in the nurse's office, her arm cradled in a sling, tears streaking her face. The principal explained that Karen had been involved in some sort of confrontation with Emma. Karen had been at the school to oversee some minor renovations, as she always did, but this time she had decided that Emma was too weird to be in her space. She had pushed Emma hard enough that her arm snapped under the pressure. And when Emma screamed in pain, Karen didn't apologize, didn't show remorse. Instead, she'd scoffed, calling Emma strange and making rude, hurtful comments about her disability. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Karen had gone too far. She had crossed a line from bullying to violence, and she had done it in front of my daughter. The damage wasn't just physical, it was emotional too. My daughter, who had fought so hard to feel normal, to be accepted, was now facing an attack not only on her body but on her very identity. At that moment, I realized something. I was done being passive. I had always been the kind of person who tried to work things out to avoid confrontation, but this wasn't a situation I could walk away from. This wasn't a situation I could simply hope would resolve itself. This was a fight for my daughter's dignity, for her safety, and for her right to feel like she belonged in this world. And I was going to fight for her, no matter what it took. Karen had underestimated me. She had underestimated how far a parent would go to protect their child. And worse, she had no idea who she was messing with. She had no idea that I wasn't just another worried parent standing by helplessly. I wasn't just someone who cared deeply for my child. I had the training, the experience, and the will to fight back. I was an ex-military officer, and I knew exactly what it took to face a challenge head-on. And Karen was about to find out just how far I was willing to go to make sure my daughter was safe and that justice was served. This wasn't going to be just another petty neighborhood dispute. This was personal. And Karen was about to learn the hard way that when you mess with someone's child, you mess with the wrong person. It had been building for weeks, the tension, the whispers, the constant discomfort of knowing that Karen, the HOA president, had made my daughter her personal target. I had always kept an eye on Karen, but for the longest time I brushed it off as nothing more than her usual overbearing attitude. She was always bossy, always too eager to interfere in matters that didn't concern her, but I had never imagined it would escalate to something as severe as this. Karen had always been vocal about her disdain for anything she considered imperfect. Whether it was the color of someone's house, the condition of their garden, or the way people behaved in the neighborhood, she couldn't help but voice her unsolicited opinions. But what really bothered me was how she had started targeting my daughter. Emma, who had a disability that affected her mobility, was now in Karen's line of fire. Karen's disgust for anything that didn't fit into her narrow vision of normalcy had shifted from words to something far darker. She had begun to refer to Emma as weird, even going so far as to call her out of place at the school where she attended. At first, I thought it was just Karen being her usual overbearing self, and I told myself to let it slide. After all, I had dealt with her complaints before, and I didn't want to make a mountain out of a molehill. But then the comments grew sharper. Karen would stop by the school uninvited, just to stand and make snide remarks to the teachers and staff. She'd call Emma strange in front of others, making it clear that she didn't think Emma belonged there. I would watch, helpless, as my daughter's face would fall, the words stinging deeper than I knew. One morning, I arrived at the school just in time to witness a confrontation between Karen and Emma in the hallway. Emma was standing near the entrance, her backpack slung over her shoulder, when Karen approached. I could see the way she walked, the slight hesitance in her steps as she approached Emma. There was something cold in Karen's eyes, something I had never seen before, but something that was unmistakable. She wasn't just annoyed anymore. She was angry, and this time I could feel that something was about to happen. Karen stepped right in front of Emma, blocking her way. "What's wrong with you?" Karen sneered, her voice dripping with disdain. "Why do you have to be so different? You really should just try to blend in, you know. People don't like weird." Emma tried to back away, but Karen advanced, pushing her backward. "You're just so out of place here," Karen said, her tone cold. Emma was silent, trying to avoid eye contact, her cheeks flushed in embarrassment. I could see her shrinking under the weight of Karen's words. I knew that Emma had been trying so hard to fit in, to find acceptance, but Karen was determined to make that impossible for her. Before I could intervene, Karen took it one step further. Without warning, she shoved Emma. The force of the shove sent Emma stumbling backward, her feet tripping over the edge of the carpet, and she lost her balance completely. The next thing I heard was the sickening crack of bone. The unmistakable sound of Emma's arm snapping under the force of the fall echoed through the hallway, and in that moment, time seemed to stop. My heart dropped and my stomach twisted in a way I had never experienced before. I rushed forward, my legs moving faster than I could comprehend. But it was too late. Emma was on the ground, her face contorted in pain, clutching her arm. I dropped to my knees beside her, and the sight of her broken arm, the way it bent unnaturally, was almost too much to bear. She was sobbing, her body shaking, her breath coming in ragged gasps. All I could do was hold her, trying to comfort her, but nothing I said could take away the pain she was feeling, not just physically, but emotionally. "Mom?" she whispered between tears, her voice strained. "Why did she do that? What did I do wrong?" Karen, standing a few feet away, looked on, her face devoid of remorse. "She's just a weird kid. She should learn to stop being so awkward," she muttered, as if it was the most natural thing in the world to say. I could feel the anger building inside me, and in that moment it wasn't just about a broken bone. It was about everything Karen had ever done to Emma, everything she had ever said to make my daughter feel like she didn't belong. I wanted to lash out, to scream at Karen, to make her understand the gravity of what she had done. But more than that, I knew this was about more than just a physical injury. This was about the assault on Emma's dignity, on her identity, on her right to exist in this world without being judged for something she couldn't control. As the paramedics arrived and took Emma to the hospital, I stayed by her side, trying to comfort her as best as I could. But even in the sterile, quiet hospital room, I could feel the emotional toll of Karen's actions. The physical pain was bad enough, but the hurt in Emma's eyes, the way she doubted herself, the way she questioned whether she was worthy of being treated with kindness and respect, was something I couldn't fix with a bandage or a cast. Karen had broken my daughter's arm, but what she had done to Emma's spirit was far more damaging. This wasn't just about a physical injury. This was about the deep emotional scars that would take much longer to heal. And that was the part that scared me the most. How would I ever be able to undo the damage Karen had caused? How could I protect Emma from someone who had so callously shattered her confidence and self-worth? The next few days were a blur of doctor visits, pain management, and legal consultations. But the emotional toll that Karen's actions had taken on Emma was undeniable. Each time Emma looked at her broken arm, I could see the hurt in her eyes. She couldn't understand why Karen had done this to her, and neither could I. What kind of person hurts a child like that, just because they're different? Karen's cruelty had reached a breaking point, and the more I thought about it, the angrier I became. I wasn't just angry at Karen for what she had done to Emma. I was furious because she had no understanding of the emotional damage she had caused. Emma wasn't just a weird kid to be pushed around and dismissed. She was my daughter, and she deserved better than this. This was no longer just about a broken arm. This was about standing up for Emma's right to exist without fear of being judged, without being hurt by someone who had no understanding of the damage they could cause. This was about Karen facing the consequences of her actions. And I knew, deep down, that this fight was just beginning. I couldn't process the full extent of what had just happened. My mind raced as I tried to make sense of the pain and chaos in front of me. Emma was crying, clutching her broken arm, her face pale and tear-streaked. My hands trembled as I held her, trying to comfort her, but the sight of her injury made my heart drop into my stomach. She wasn't just hurt physically, the emotional toll was far worse. She looked at me with confusion and fear, as if she was questioning what she had done to deserve this. It broke me to see her like this. No child should ever have to experience this kind of cruelty, especially not from an adult who was supposed to be a member of the community, someone who should have known better. But what shook me the most was Karen's indifference. I expected anger, regret, maybe even a little bit of panic from her, but instead, she stood there, unfazed by the scene unfolding before her. Karen had pushed Emma so hard that she had fallen, her arm snapping under the force. And instead of showing any concern for what had happened, Karen just stood there, her arms crossed as she watched Emma writhe in pain. She even had the audacity to say, "It was an accident. She's just so weird. Maybe if she learned to stop being so awkward, this wouldn't have happened." The words stung, but what stung more was her complete lack of remorse. How could someone be so cruel, so callous about something like this? I felt my anger rising, but I also knew that I had to stay calm. I couldn't afford to let my emotions take over. Not now, not with Emma in so much pain and everything hanging in the balance. I forced myself to take deep breaths, focusing on my daughter, trying to reassure her as best I could. But my thoughts were racing. Karen had gone too far. I couldn't let this go, not after everything she had said and done. This wasn't just about a broken arm. It was about the physical and emotional damage she had inflicted on Emma. The ambulance arrived soon after, and I helped Emma into the vehicle, trying my best to keep her calm, though I was far from calm myself. The ride to the hospital was a blur. All I could think about was Karen, her cold indifference, and how she had reduced my daughter to nothing more than an object of ridicule. She had no idea who she was dealing with, no idea that this wouldn't be just another one of her petty neighborhood squabbles. As we rushed to the emergency room, I began to steady my thoughts. I had served in the military for years, a different kind of life, a life where staying calm under pressure was essential. But this was personal. I was trained to keep my head when everything around me was falling apart, to assess the situation and make decisions based on logic and strategy. But the difference now was that it wasn't just about handling a dangerous mission or saving lives. It was about my daughter. It was about protecting her and making sure someone who was capable of this kind of cruelty would never be allowed to do it again. I'd been in high-stress situations before, but nothing prepared me for the depths of betrayal I was feeling right then. As the doctor examined Emma, I could feel the weight of what had happened sink in. The medical team was moving quickly, getting her x-rays and ensuring she was as comfortable as possible, but Karen's words were still echoing in my mind. It didn't matter that Emma's injury was being taken care of. It didn't matter that Karen had already started the process of manipulating the situation, claiming it was an accident, an unfortunate incident. What mattered now was that I wasn't just going to sit back and let Karen walk away from this. This wasn't just going to be swept under the rug. When the doctor confirmed that Emma's arm was indeed broken, the full weight of the situation crashed down on me. Karen had taken something from my daughter that could never be replaced. This wasn't just an injury. This was an assault on Emma's confidence, her trust in the world around her. She would never forget how Karen made her feel. She would never forget how someone who was supposed to be a part of the community had treated her with such cruelty. And yet, Karen had no clue what was coming. She had no idea who she had just messed with. She was still living in her world of ignorance, thinking she could manipulate and control anyone she wanted, thinking that I was just another parent who would cry in silence and let it go. But she was wrong. I wasn't just a parent. I wasn't just a victim in this situation. I was someone who had faced much bigger challenges before, and I knew how to fight back when it mattered. I hadn't told Karen yet who I was, what I had done in my past, and how that experience had shaped me. But I knew that soon she would find out. She would find out that I wasn't just any father. No, I had been trained to handle threats, to handle people who thought they could get away with anything. I had seen the worst of the worst, and now, Karen was about to find out that when you cross a line with someone who knows how to protect their own, there are consequences. While Emma was in pain, Karen remained blissfully unaware of the storm that was brewing. She thought this was just another misunderstanding, just another moment where she could walk away unscathed. But the truth was far from that. Karen had just started a battle she couldn't win. And when she found out who I was, what I had done, who I had been, she would understand exactly how far I was willing to go to make sure she paid for what she had done. Emma's arm would heal, but this fight was far from over. And Karen had no idea what she had just set in motion. The days that followed Emma's injury were filled with a sense of mounting tension. I tried my best to focus on Emma's healing process, comforting her, and keeping her calm as much as possible. But inside, I was burning with anger. Every time I looked at her arm, every time I saw the way Karen's words had wounded her, I felt the same fury rising within me. How could anyone do this to a child? How could someone, an adult, a member of our community, think that it was okay to hurt another person so callously just because they didn't fit their idea of what was normal? It was something that I couldn't just sit back and accept. I knew I had to take action. I had always been someone who valued calmness and control. As an ex-military officer, I was trained to handle high-pressure situations with level-headedness. But now I wasn't just facing a dangerous situation or an enemy. I was facing a woman who had done the unthinkable to my daughter. And it wasn't just about the physical injury anymore. It was about the violation of Emma's dignity, her sense of safety, and everything I had worked so hard to protect. That's when I knew it was time to confront Karen. I had made up my mind. I would face her. I would stand in front of her and demand that she understand exactly what she had done, and more importantly, that she take responsibility for it. I wasn't going to let her walk away without facing the consequences of her actions. I wasn't going to let her pretend that this was just another one of her petty disputes. So I tracked Karen down. I found her at one of her usual meetings, trying to rally the other HOA members around her, no doubt spreading lies about the incident and playing the victim. She didn't expect me to walk into the room. She didn't expect me to show up at all. But when I did, her smug smile faltered. She looked up, her eyes widening slightly as she saw me standing there. Her eyes flicked nervously to the other members of the group, and for the first time, I saw a hint of uncertainty in her gaze. The power she had held so effortlessly, the control she'd wielded over the community, suddenly seemed fragile. And in that moment, I knew I had her. I wasn't just the concerned father anymore. I wasn't just another face in the crowd. No, I was someone with power, with experience, and with a purpose. I was someone who would not back down. I walked up. To her slowly, my steps deliberate. Every move I made, every breath I took was measured. The calmness I exuded wasn't just for show, it was my strength. Karen might have thought she could intimidate me, but she was about to learn the truth. When you mess with someone who has the training and the ability to protect their own, there are real consequences. I stood in front of her, my gaze unwavering, and I spoke, my voice steady and low. "Karen, you just made the biggest mistake of your life." Her eyes flickered with confusion, and for a moment she seemed unsure of what was happening. But that confusion quickly turned to realization as I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out my military ID, holding it up for her to see. The badge gleamed in the light, the words "Ex-Millitary Officer" clearly visible. Her face drained of color, and she stumbled backward, her eyes wide with fear. "I'm an ex-military officer," I continued, my voice still calm but with an undeniable edge. "I know how to handle situations like this, and I know how to make sure that someone like you faces the consequences for what you've done." The room fell silent. Karen's smugness had vanished completely, replaced by palpable fear. The other HOA members shifted uncomfortably, unsure of what to do or say. But I wasn't interested in them. I wasn't interested in anything but making Karen understand the severity of her actions. The shift in power was unmistakable. The woman, who had once held all the cards, who had once made everyone around her feel small and insignificant, was now the one on the defensive. Karen's lips trembled, and she opened her mouth, likely to offer some excuse or try to explain her way out of the situation. But I wasn't going to let her off the hook. Not this time. "You don't get to push my daughter around, you don't get to hurt her and think you can just walk away from it. You've broken her arm and you've damaged her sense of security. You've hurt her in ways that go far beyond physical injury, and you will be held accountable for it." I took a step closer, my presence now looming over her. "You may have thought that your position in this neighborhood gave you power. You may have thought you could intimidate everyone into doing what you wanted, but you're not untouchable. And I'm going to make sure you understand that. This is far from over." Karen's face was a mix of anger and fear, and I could see the realization sinking in. She thought she had the upper hand because she controlled the HOA, because she was used to manipulating people and getting away with it. But now, she was realizing that her power meant nothing in the face of someone who was willing to fight for what was right. She couldn't intimidate me, she couldn't bully me into submission, and she certainly couldn't escape the consequences of what she had done. The room was still silent, the tension hanging thick in the air. Karen didn't know what to say. She didn't know how to respond to someone who wasn't afraid of her anymore. She was standing in the midst of her own downfall, and she knew it. There was no way out for her now. I had taken control of the situation, and she would face the consequences, whether she liked it or not. "I've made sure that everything will be documented, Karen," I said, my voice low but firm. "The school, the police, the community, you won't be able to cover this up. And when the legal system gets involved, you will be held accountable for everything you've done." Her face, now ashen, betrayed the fear that was coursing through her veins. She opened her mouth to say something, but no words came out. It was as if the power had shifted entirely, and now, for the first time, Karen was the one standing in the shadow of someone who was unwilling to back down. The calm before the storm had passed, and now it was time for the storm to break. The aftermath of Karen's actions unfolded swiftly as the ripple effect of her cruelty began to take shape. The truth, which had been concealed beneath her facade of authority and arrogance, was now undeniable. What started as a simple incident, one that Karen thought she could brush off, had spiraled into something far bigger, a confrontation that had led to profound consequences. Karen had broken more than just Emma's arm. She had broken the trust of an entire community, and no amount of manipulation could erase that. The legal consequences came quickly, as I had expected. The police were notified immediately, and soon after, a formal report was filed. Witness statements from the teachers at the school, the paramedics, and even the other parents who had witnessed the incident came together to form a powerful case against Karen. It was no longer just a matter of an injured child. It had become a legal matter. Karen's reckless behavior had escalated into a serious offense, one that could not be ignored. The legal process took its course, And while Karen tried to deflect and dismiss the severity of the situation, the law could not be swayed by her excuses. As the investigation continued, Karen was forced to confront the reality of her actions. She couldn't hide behind the HOA position she had once used to control people. The damage she had caused was undeniable, and she would have to answer for it. The community, once divided by her power, began to see her for who she truly was, a woman who had used her influence to hurt others, a woman who had no regard for the safety or well-being of those around her. Her position in the HOA was stripped from her, and the board immediately removed her from any further involvement in the community. The people who had once cowered under her domineering presence now stood firm, united in their refusal to allow her behavior to continue unchecked. The emotional consequences for Karen were just as severe. She found herself isolated, her once prominent position in the neighborhood completely shattered. Friends, neighbors, and even colleagues distanced themselves from her, no longer willing to tolerate her cruel behavior. The walls she had built around herself, the control she had wielded over others, crumbled in the face of the truth. For the first time, Karen faced real consequences, personal, emotional, and professional, for her actions. And though it was hard to watch her unravel, I knew that she had earned every bit of the fallout. No one, especially not someone like her, should ever think they could get away with hurting another person, let alone a child. As for Emma, the healing process was long and difficult, but not just physically. The broken arm would eventually heal, and the doctors assured us that she would recover fully. But it was the emotional scar, the fear, the doubt, and the pain that was harder to erase. Karen's words and actions had left a deep mark on Emma's soul, one that took time to heal. The confidence she once had seemed to fade, replaced by a hesitation to trust others. For days, Emma wouldn't talk about what happened. She withdrew, her bright spirit dimmed by the weight of the cruelty she had endured. It was heartbreaking to see her like this, to know that someone's thoughtless words had left her feeling so small, so unworthy. But as the days passed, something began to shift. I made sure Emma knew she was safe, that she would always have a place to stand tall and confident. I assured her that she wasn't weird, that her disability didn't make her any less valuable, and that she had the right to be herself, no matter what anyone else thought. I reminded her of all the times she had shown courage, the moments when she had overcome obstacles others couldn't even imagine. My words, though well-intentioned, didn't seem to break through the wall Emma had built around herself. It wasn't until we started to receive support from others that things began to change. The community, once divided by Karen's influence, began to show their support for Emma in ways I hadn't expected. Neighbors, friends, and even people I didn't know began to reach out, offering help, encouragement, and love. Parents from the school sent cards, letters, and even small gifts to Emma, expressing their outrage at what had happened and their belief in her strength. It was like a wave of warmth and kindness washed over us, reminding us that despite Karen's actions, there were good people in this world who believed in justice and compassion. Emma started to feel the weight of that support. She began to open up again, to trust the people around her, and slowly, her confidence returned. It wasn't an overnight change, but with each passing day, Emma began to heal, not just from the injury, but from the hurt Karen had caused. She learned that her worth wasn't defined by one person's cruelty, and that her community cared for her, loved her, and accepted her for exactly who she was. I was proud of her resilience, proud of the way she had found her strength, even in the darkest of times. And as her healing continued, I began to feel a sense of relief, knowing that Emma was not alone in this. The community had stepped in to fill the gap left by Karen's absence. And together, we had shown Emma that she was not the one who had been wrong. Karen was. It was Karen who had broken the trust, the community's sense of safety, and her own reputation. Emma had emerged from this stronger, more aware of the world's cruelty, but also more aware of its kindness. Looking back, I knew that this journey had been far from easy. The legal battles, the emotional toll, and the physical injury all weighed heavily on us. But through it all, I learned one important thing. Sometimes the fight for justice is long and it's hard, but it's always worth it. It wasn't just about holding Karen accountable. It was about showing Emma that no matter what, she would always have someone in her corner, someone who would fight for her with everything they had. And in the end, we won that fight together. In the end. This experience taught me something valuable. When it comes to protecting the ones you love, there are no boundaries. No matter who the enemy is or how powerful they think they are, you must stand your ground. Justice, no matter how long it takes, will always prevail. Karen thought she could break my daughter's spirit and get away with it. But she didn't. Realized that the strength to fight back was always there, within us. It wasn't just about legal consequences. It was about standing up for what's right and ensuring that no one, especially someone vulnerable, is ever hurt without facing accountability. We must always fight for those who can't fight for themselves, especially when the world seems to be stacked against them. It's up to us to show the strength of our convictions and stand firm in the face of injustice. The road to healing is long, but with the support of others and the courage to speak out, no obstacle is insurmountable. So, I want to hear from you. What would you have done if you were in my shoes? How far would you go to protect your loved ones? Have you ever found yourself in a situation where you had to stand up for someone even when the odds seemed impossible? Share your stories in the comments, and let's keep the conversation going. Your experience might inspire someone else who's facing their own battle right now. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for more powerful stories like this. Together, we can make sure justice always prevails.